Okay, time to wake up, you lazy son of a bitch. It's time to make a video. Get your ass up. Get up. There's a stigma surrounding the topic of cultural appropriation that assumes that if you partake in this kind of appropriation, that you are a racist, ignorant, evil person. And yes, it could be a bad thing, but it could also be one of the only ways that culture grows. Let's talk about it. Recently, there was an article that called out a child at a Chiefs game for being the new spearhead for Black and Native American racism, making the claim that this child was wearing blackface and culturally appropriating Native American culture by wearing a headdress at a Kansas City Chiefs game. An excerpt from the article states, "It takes a lot to disrespect two groups of people at once, but on Sunday afternoon in Las Vegas, a Kansas City Chiefs fan found a way to hate Black people and the Native Americans at the same time. But thankfully, I just so happen to be the Sherlock Holmes of our generation, because otherwise this mystery probably would have gone unsolved."
Take a look at this.
First off, the kid's face isn't even painted in blackface. I'm not even a fan of football, but even I know that painting your face the colors of your team is standard football tradition. But Bobby, the Chiefs' colors are red and gold. You're right, but that doesn't automatically make it blackface. It could be, but there's also millions of other possibilities of what it could be as well. We actually have no idea what that face paint might represent. It feels a little dangerous and irresponsible to claim that this is 100% racially motivated without any sufficient evidence. I would need way more evidence to feel safe in making this kind of a judgment. Not only that, but it seems a little bit more malicious that Carron J. Phillips, the writer of the article, would purposely exclude the photo showing the other side of the child's face. And before people start to try and point out that there is now a picture with both sides of the face on the article was posted on the 27th. That picture is added 3 days later in an update, not in the original posting of the article. What logical reason could there be to make the claim that this child was doing blackface, but only show one side of the face? Could be that you're a dogshit journalist who has a narrative in mind already and doesn't give a fuck about the facts. Who knows? But obviously this story was the perfect concoction for the internet's finest warriors. Luckily, I'm not going to have to do a bunch of reading because I found a video that got 7 million views that captures the essence of the type of people that are going with this story uncritically.
Did you guys see the racism bingo card image of the little kid at the Chiefs game wearing a full... I don't say little kid to make it like to excuse this, but to emphasize that it was like probably multiple adults involved in doing this to this kid, wearing a full headdress and blackface.
This is the Jenkins and Jonez podcast. It's a sports podcast primarily, but today they chose to fumble their brain in the end zone and dedicate a 5-minute segment to calling a child a racist for wearing blackface and wearing a headdress at a football game.
It's crazy, G. That is wild. And you know, I like we talked about this before. I feel like the parent had to be like, let's roll the kid out and see what happens. You know, maybe if he can get away with it, I could try it next. They're not going to jump a fucking child, are they?
You're saying dad is soft launching the blackface?
Right. Maybe I can get away with it. Yeah, it's crazy, dog.
If I'm going to be as charitable as I can to this guy, he was making a shitty joke, but the joke doesn't really land if you think the kid was actually doing blackface. He makes the claim that the parents are the real racists and concocted this plan to send their son out in blackface and in native attire to test the waters of racism, to see what they would get away with.
My whole shit is, why was there blackface on, a Native American? That's
why
what
not?
I was wondering.
If you're going to throw the headdress on, fuck it.
And no, here's my thing, because it should have been red face, right? Like, if we're going to be racist, we got to be accurately racist. You know what I'm saying? But my whole thing is this, like, if you're going out to buy some shit, to darken your face, why did you not buy the red shit instead of the black shit? Did you just have some blackface material hanging around your crib because you were like so deeply rooted into the racism?
You are the fucking dumbest motherfucker on the planet. What type of universe do you have to construct in your mind to make a statement like this, implying that this kid and his family is so racist that they keep blackface material on them at all times in order to make sure that they are never unprepared to be racist?
You know how kids sometimes like really want to do stuff that their parents do? Is the kid's like, Dad, is today the day I get to do the blackface? You know?
Yeah. Well, you just turned 12, son.
Time to become a man.
Time to become a man. Go get my shoe polish.
Right.
I don't think people realize how much damage they are doing to the history of blackface and what it represents when they do coverage like this. Claiming what this kid did as blackface is actually diminishing the meaning of the word to mean somebody who puts on blackface paint. Blackface is a specific action taken by somebody to imitate black people. There's a bit more to it than just having on black face paint. The intent doesn't seem to be there at all to constitute this level of criticism and to garner the label of a racist. That's not to say that some Native American groups and some Native American people might find this offensive, but that is a far cry from it 100% being racially motivated. There's not enough evidence that this was a racially motivated action. But none of that matters, because once there was a bit of pushback, people moved away from the blackface claims and instead focused on the headdress. One of the larger voices that I found to speak more specifically about the headdress is a YouTuber named Knowing Better. Knowing Better is a fairly large creator who covers... I honestly couldn't really tell you. I've never watched a single one of these videos, but just from the thumbnails and titles, the guess I'm gonna make is he speaks about American history, religion, and other social topics from a leftist perspective. That's cool, I guess, but if it's anything like his analysis of this situation, I can safely assume it's mostly critically brain-dead content. Knowing Better responded to one of the articles on Twitter. I fail to see how that explanation is any better, in reference to the community note that was added to the Deadspin article, which reads, "The picture on the article is misleading. Other pictures of the child in question show that the other half of his face is painted red, black and red being the team's colors." And his response to that was, "I fail to see how that explanation is any better." He goes on to say, "Way too many people in the replies here don't get the issue here. It's the headdress. This isn't something American Indians just wore casually. They never wore it riding into battle. Only certain people wore it in specific ceremonial situations. If there was a team that inspired its fans to wear turbans or one of those little Jewish yarmulkes, nobody would question whether it was insensitive. But you're all so used to viewing Indians as cartoon characters that seeing someone dressed up this way doesn't faze you. The community note doesn't make the situation better. The NFL needs to address people dressing up in blackface and headdresses. Actually, this particular picture is in blackface. That does not negate the headline. They're only being racist to one group rather than two." The mother of the child spoke out on Facebook stating that they are Chumash Indian. Not only that, but the grandfather of that boy is a committee member of the Santa Ynez Band of Chumash Indians. So not only is this boy of Native American descent, his grandfather is an elected official representing the tribe. I don't even know how I'm supposed to continue this video. I don't even want to believe this is true because of how absolutely batshit insane this is. How can you even begin to call yourself a journalist and be that wrong every step of the way? The blackface was a blatant fabrication and the kid in question is Native American. I double-checked the sources to make sure the Facebook accounts weren't faked. Both of the parents' accounts were made by 2010, and it's undeniable that they are, without a shadow of a doubt, the parents of the child in question. So yeah, Knowing Better YouTube is a dumb piece of shit who actually doesn't know better. Everyone on Jenkins and Jonez podcast, I hope your careers crash and burn. Even though there really isn't enough of a career for you guys to fuel a dying campfire, it'd be more like the end of Gwyneth Paltrow's pussy candle getting blown out. And most importantly, Carron J. Phillips, the author of the article. I hope the only thing that you get to write going forward are tweets that get 10 likes, and every time you get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, you piss yourself on the way there.
But hold on, a rematch has been called. It's the Jenkins and Jonez podcast. How are they even still standing?
The Jenkins and Jonez podcast dropped a response, and they honestly made some pretty good points. They state that the only reason they got criticized was because of, they're black.
The people who are angry at us, I know why they're angry at us because they don't like black people. Like, that's the fucking point. I mean, right, like that's the crux of the shit.
Honestly, so true. It couldn't possibly be a criticism based on the ethics of your coverage. It's definitely your skin color. I'm racist. John goes on to make the claim that they never dragged the kid.
But bro, like if you watch the clip, we never dragged that kid. Nope. Right? Our whole shit was what the fuck are these parents doing trying their kid out like this, right? And I still stand on that. Like you can look, we seen the little Facebook page that popped up that's supposedly from this kid's mom that just came out yesterday. There's no friends on there. There's no photos on there, but we're just taking the word that that's this kid's mom. And it's like, bro, whatever information you present to me is not going to change my opinion when I ask what the fuck is wrong with the parents for trying their kid out like this. Like the kid can be native or whatever if that's the case, but why did you do the fucking face paint, right? Like why did you do the black face and the red face? That's always going to be a question. Like why would you set your kid up like that?
I guess implying that the kid is doing blackface isn't considered dragging. Getting called racist seems like a drag to me, but what do I know?
I think this is kind of an exercise in how you have to kind of digest information because like I said, everyone's jumping on that Facebook page from that mom and I'm like, bro, do y'all see this Facebook page? Like this shit popped up yesterday. There's no activity on it. It's just this, no photos, no friends. I'm just saying like this. If I had a native kid who was catching all this heat, for wearing a native headdress, my whole thing is this, like, bro, if you got the native headdress and you have a native kid, I'm sure that kid has worn that headdress and some other shit, some ceremonial shit, right? Like, drop that picture as a big joker to show us that this kid has worn that headdress like outside of the game. And for them to just pop up with a Facebook page yesterday, like, bro, I'm not buying that shit. I'm gonna need to see a little more.
Let me just be the one to show you a little more. If you actually open the article that covers the story, the father's name is actually a link you could click on that leads directly to the Facebook account of the father. And if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, there's this timestamp that shows this account has been around since at least 2010. I'm not gonna sit here and show you all their pictures because I'm not a fucking weirdo, but the information is out there in the articles where the story was covered. But Bobby, he didn't say anything about the dad's Facebook account. He said the mother's account was made yesterday. Now, the mother's account wasn't linked in the article, but the crazy thing about social media is that I found her page too. She does a wacky and zany thing like commenting on her husband's page. And if you scroll to the bottom of her profile, well, will you look at that?
And for them to just pop up with a Facebook page yesterday, like, bro, I'm not buying that shit. I'm gonna need to see a little more.
We're just joking about it. And if it bothers you that much, you're the people complaining about cancel culture.
Mm-hmm. Same motherfuckers.
Like,
bro,
get a sense of humor and chill the fuck out, bro. It's all a joke. It's like everything's funny or nothing's funny.
If you've watched any of my content, you'll know that I don't shy away from making offensive jokes. I think it's funny as fuck. But the reason I think it's funny is because I do those jokes in videos where I'm advocating for the opposite. In my Velma video, I opened that video by stating that I'm a racist. All right. Hold up. You don't know what I'm gonna say. I know you think you know, but you don't, okay? Okay, I'm fucking racist. It's funny to say that and then go on to do a commentary about how dogshit corporations are at representing minority groups. That joke I make in the beginning of my Velma video would come off a lot different if I actually was racist. It isn't a joke anymore. I still might think it's funny, but people around me should be cautious about laughing. You guys can't just say you're doing jokes as you defend the fundamental sentiment in your response video. We would never let anybody else get away with something like this. If a Nazi were to start making jokes about Jews, all of us would know that they probably believed in whatever fuck shit they're saying. They had a little back and forth on Twitter with a community note being added to their post and then later it being removed. The way the community notes function on Twitter is kind of like an upvote system. From my understanding, notes can be proposed to be placed under certain tweets and people can vote whether the note is helpful or not. If it's voted helpful enough, it is posted, and if not, then it is removed or not posted.
You sent us a tweet from someone who was involved in the community note process, and I want to read that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is from user Oba the Great One. He says, I'm a part of the community notes. I voted for the bottom choice. The stuff that comes across for review be crazy in all caps. I'll read the community note that got posted, then I'll read the bottom one that he said he voted for. So the community note that got posted for us said, the child was not in blackface. The other half of his face was painted red, as can be seen from the photo found at the following tweet. And you know, the whole Chiefs colors are black shit. And then
which they're not, which I just, again, because it was making me crazy. Black is not one of the Chiefs colors.
Yes, right. And then this is the note that he voted for that didn't get posted. It said that child is wearing half blackface and half red face. His whole painted face and indigenous headpiece are very racially and culturally inappropriate and can be offensive to black, African American, Native American, and indigenous people, right? Like that was one that he said he voted on that didn't get, you know, approved because, right, like the note says there that could be offensive, right?
Right.
It says that. It doesn't say it is offensive. It says it could. And that is like, you know, fact-based reporting there, right? That yes, some people are going to find offensive with this.
The problem is that these guys are asserting that the face paint on the child's face is in fact black and red face, when that hasn't been proven. Their source for this information is the Deadspin article that doesn't prove that this was a racially motivated action. They are correct when they say that the Chiefs' colors are not red and black, but that doesn't automatically mean that what the kid was doing was blackface. Now, I can't actually tell you 100% what the internal feelings of this kid and his family are, whether or not they are racist or not. I don't know that. But neither can these guys. They are making this assertion that the face paint is supposed to represent black or native people, when it could just as easily represent a million other things. Maybe the dad is a Raiders fan and the mom is a Chiefs fan, so they put one color of each. It could have been a stylistic choice because red and black look good together with the clothes that he was wearing. Or maybe he and his family are just secret racists who just really want to let it out. Regardless of what their true intentions were, we as a viewer are always going to just be making those assumptions. So personally, I find it a little irresponsible and dangerous to make the worst judgment of somebody without sufficient evidence to back it up.
And I saw in the replies, there's people saying I'm native and it's not offensive. I'm never going to be a white person saying black people should be offended by this, native people should be, ever in my fucking life. Cool that it didn't offend you. I might have friends, I do have friends who felt that the kid wearing blackface is offensive. That's their right to say, and not even be aggrieved or offended, but to say that's racist or is offensive. I've got people in my family who are native who are offended by people who are very offended, who I've even who don't think that teams like the Chiefs or the Braves should have those names. I don't even go that laugh. I'm not one of those people. I didn't think that the Washington team should have their football team name.
Yeah,
But like
that's
that's
OD.
right. That's a spectrum of things that you can feel, like you could talk about with your friends, and it's not a big deal or whatever.
I've said this in past videos countless times. You can be a part of a particular group and have absolutely zero idea about what the fuck you're talking about. Just because I happen to be Native American doesn't make me a scholar about Native American issues or whatever the fuck. And that goes for everybody. Scholars are scholars. People are not automatically scholars just because they happen to be a part of a particular group. I don't like it when people find a person from a specific group who happens to agree with them and use that as a way to validate their positions. I'm not saying that these guys did that because it doesn't seem like they used that argument at all, but it's just a point I want to make and point out. If you see people that do this, it usually means that they don't have a good argument. This is tokenizing minority groups to justify a shitty argument instead of having to actually engage with the actual issue. Tell me what you know about. Don't tell me what your minority friend says. Let me know what you think. But, you know, at the end of the day, probably not a great idea to open up your response to the backlash by making an easily debunkable claim and then following up by saying, all of the criticism that you got was from racist Trump supporters who hate black people. Now, fuck off so I could finish my video. Cultural appropriation is one of those issues that I have never personally had that much of an issue with, but this is something that pisses off the souls of 20-year-old pumpkin spice socialist girls on Twitter, so it's probably worth talking about. People seem to have a warped view and understanding of what culture is, and also have no idea how to discern the difference between negative and positive cultural appropriation. Cultural appropriation in and of itself is not necessarily bad. It is an action, and depending on the context surrounding that action, it can change our perspective of whether or not that action is good or bad. This goes for most actions. The action itself isn't a bad or a good thing. It matters what the surrounding context is in order for us to make that judgment. For example, killing is an action. Some people might say it's always a bad action, but in reality, it depends on the context. If you kill in self-defense, that's an okay action because you are protecting yourself. But if you kill somebody for a bad reason, you go to jail. The same concept should be applied to cultural appropriation. Some people might call this concept nuance. There are definitely instances of cultural appropriation that should be called out, but just the mere act of participating in somebody else's culture shouldn't elicit backlash. Personally, I believe that culture exists to be shared. Culture isn't this magical thing set in stone by some fairy. Culture is all of the greatest things produced by particular groups of people. Art, music, clothing, food, and all those things get even better when different cultural groups collide and share these things.
In the context of my field of expertise, I think gatekeeping is running its course. I honestly don't care who cooks this food anymore. I used to, but now the more I learn and the better I get, the more I realize that it's not really my place to say who gets to learn this culture. Make no mistake, it took me a while to get here. There's been a lot of pain attached to being made to feel inferior because of the types of food I used to bring to school or whatever, but that story is so tired. And I realize that those issues won't be dealt with by safeguarding my memory of food. What gets me is the fact that the worst gatekeepers will criticize their own people for not adhering to their own memories of culture. The fact that I don't do it like someone's grandma gives them a right to flame in my comments telling me how I'm doing it wrong and it's offensive. And to that I say, shut the f up, Kevin. Don't come for me or my food because your dead grandma's dumplings were actually really doughy. She bought her shit frozen and used way too much chicken powder in her broth. You're an expert only on your memory and not of the culture, so settle down.
We're at an amazing time in human history that no other people before us could have possibly imagined. We have the ability to witness and partake in cultures from around the world without ever having to go to the actual place it's from. One of the major points that I'm probably going to have to fight on the hardest, and the point that maybe you could convince me otherwise on, is that I don't think culture really has anything to do with your race. So what is culture? Culture is the man-made formulations of different customs and creations that represent a collective of people. Obviously, cultures are going to have some proximal connection to race and ethnicity, but that isn't a necessary condition for the existence of a culture. Cultures are molded by external environments. The foods different cultures produce are purely based on what the land they live on provides. From art and clothes to the types of innovations that are made and animals that are available to be hunted. Cultures are strictly molded by their surroundings. Obviously, most cultures are going to have a cohesive racial identity that coincides with that culture. But that's because culture started with small families, and then once those populations expanded, the cultures evolved to represent the village, then later the nation, then later the country. And all along the way that culture would evolve as more and more of their surroundings changed. Still to this day, culture is evolving and will probably forever evolve until they are unrecognizable in 100 years, same as the cultures of today have evolved beyond recognition to our ancestors. But race has absolutely nothing to do with the formulation of culture. The most important aspect of a culture existing is the connection of a group of people tied to whatever similarities that culture has. It isn't determined by what shade of brown you are. White people may not be able to understand this experience firsthand, but in minority brown and black families, it is commonplace to have siblings that are way lighter than you and way darker than you. But you both still have the same cultural background. Here's something that I want you guys to think about for a little bit. Let's say that a Native American family adopts a white child. Do we think that the white child is going to more resonate with Native American culture? Or is there some like intrinsic factor of that white child's race that is going to exude a different culture? Like, let's say that child is Irish or something like that. Do you think there's going to be more of a connection to the Irish roots of his biology? Or do you think that there's going to be more of a connection to the foods that he's been exposed to the type of music that he's been exposed to, the culture that he's grown up with? Does it have anything to do with race? Or is it all about proximity? The only group that I can think of that even comes remotely close to being a culture tied together by the color of their skin is black culture. But even the black culture condition for existing isn't necessarily the fact that they have black skin. I'd argue the existence of their culture is overtly due to the conditions they were subjected to during slavery in America, not their skin. I think we all kind of know this. If a black African comes to America, the overlap of their culture and black American culture is not going to be a perfect circle. Black Africans are not going to have the same experience as a black American who is a descendant of slavery. They are the same skin color, but the divide that separates their culture is wider than the ocean that separates our continents. So what are the negative aspects of cultural appropriation? The main issue with cultural appropriation is when people not of a particular culture take parts of that culture and use it for monetary gain. But I don't necessarily have a problem with people making money off of a culture that they aren't originally a part of, as long as the intention isn't solely the pursuit of profit. For example, a bad way to appropriate culture would be if someone like Jeff Bezos came along and started up a bunch of authentic Mexican restaurants in order to capitalize on that market. Quick disclaimer before the comments go crazy. As I was making this example, I started to realize that Bezos doesn't sound like a white name. Jeff Bezos is of Mexican and Cuban descent, but let's just pretend we don't know that and continue with the example. Just pretend Jeff Bezos is white, and like everybody else does. He's white enough, okay? I just need a villain, okay? Relax. In this hypothetical, Jeff Bezos is opening authentic Mexican restaurants in order to make money, and in turn is exploiting Mexican culture just to make money off of it. For me, it isn't an issue that Jeff Bezos isn't Mexican. It's the fact he's taking a piece of somebody else's culture to squeeze out the coins from that well. But if Jeff Bezos came along and had a massive appreciation of Mexican food and really wanted to start a Mexican food restaurant, pop off, white boy. And while we're on the topic of white boys profiting off of culture, one of the best examples of that is Eminem. Eminem is a white rapper that massively profits off of rap, which is culturally defined as a black-made art. But you can see that he's doing it with the utmost respect of the craft and the predecessors that influenced him. He makes millions and millions of dollars off of other people's culture. But at this point, he has embodied it to such a high degree that most people consider him not only a part of the culture, but a big reason for its popularity. This is another reason why I would say race has nothing to do with culture. It's almost fully divorced from the idea. And this is why I don't really have an issue with the mere act of making money from a culture that isn't yours. It again has to do with the surrounding context. The problem with cultural appropriation isn't the color of your skin or whether or not you can make Mexican food or wear certain clothes. It's about how much you appreciate that particular culture. I don't think you can become proficient at making different cultural arts without having that initial respect to the culture first. It's understandable that you might be upset that other people are seemingly disrespecting your culture, but participation isn't disrespect. Participating in other cultures is actually one of the best ways for diverse communities to thrive. What better way is there to connect to different people than to dance their dances, sing their songs, and enjoy their foods? Culture is a human connection. And the more we share our respective cultures, the more we get to see people for who they really are. Obviously, we can and we should call out real disrespect, but in order to call out the bad, the good needs to be sufficiently distinguished.
The people who are angry at us, I know why they're angry at us because they don't like black people. Like, that's the
Period.
fucking point.
Honestly, so true.